The F1 world has been shaken by the latest move of Daniel Ricciardo, who has signed a contract with Alpha Tauri for the remainder of the 2023 season and replaced Vries, who didn't manage to satisfy the needs of Red Bull. Although this is something that might not seem like a direct threat to Red Bull's seat, Ricciardo's plan is much more threatening than we'd possibly imagine. And right now, the driver who needs to be very careful with how he performs in the remainder of the season is Sergio Perez. So why is Ricciardo's move to AlphaTauri bad news for Perez, and is there any way that the Austrian team will do the same to the Mexican driver as they did to Vries? Ever since Ricciardo was signed as a reserve driver for Red Bull, it was obvious that he hinted at a comeback in 2024. However, as we all know, up until this point, the Aussie didn't want to just drive for any team out there. He wanted to compete for wins and podiums, which is an accomplishment he could only receive from the top teams. Nonetheless, it wasn't possible at the time for Red Bull to give him a contract due to the fact that they were obligated with Perez, but with how the 2023 season started on a flying note for the Mexican driver and how he started to threaten Verstappen for the championship fight yet again, things have changed in the matter of 10 races. Had the contract for Ricciardo in AlphaTauri been offered a couple of weeks or even months ago, I doubt he would have even read it, let alone considered signing it. Before the end of the 2022 season, he publicly said that a midfield or project team is not something that he's looking forward to, but now he'll be racing in the worst car on the grid for the remainder of the 12 races in 2023. So why the change of narrative all of a sudden, and what's in there for Ricciardo? When talking about his future in the sport, the Honey Badger said, "I'm remaining open-minded. If it's like this is you and you are signing a 3-year deal with AlphaTauri and that's the only place you are going to be, then no, that's maybe not the deal I would look for. But if there's the possibility to obviously be in here in Red Bull, the truth is this is where I want to be. I'm not going to weave my way around it. I'd love to get back on the grid next year." Now, Ricciardo has managed to get back on the grid even earlier than next year, and he will have one hell of a mission on his hands: deliver points in one of the worst cars on the grid, the AT04. So far, Tsunoda has been able to pick up only 2 points for the team, but has regularly hanged around in 11th place, meaning that if Ricciardo picks up the pace and has strong Sundays behind him, then he might do what Hülkenberg did for Haas, just on a greater note: bring AT back in the midfield. Obviously, this might have been given to him as a mission or an ultimatum before he's offered the seat at Red Bull, because apart from him, many experts believe that it is Liam Lawson who is considered the primary target for AlphaTauri, as the youngster is now performing extraordinarily well in the Super Formula Championship in Japan. Signing the 34-year-old Ricciardo has nothing to do with him ending his career in AlphaTauri, and obviously he has his eyes on the bigger picture, replacing Perez at Red Bull. With how the Mexican driver has been acting lately and missing out on Q3 regularly, it's safe to say that he definitely holds the hottest spot in F1, as he's constantly being called out by his team and his teammates, who said that right now he doesn't need Perez to fight for the championship, as he can do it on his own. Keep in mind that Ricciardo completed the Silverstone tyre test on Tuesday, and the results were quite competitive, as Horner labelled them. They were on par with Verstappen's times. Of course, there are variable factors here that Ricciardo has going in his own favour, such as clean track, but the simulation work and his on-track performance were literally translated, and as of now, Ricciardo hasn't lost the ability to drive the RB19, which is definitely what Red Bull needs if they're to replace Perez with Verstappen's best friend. But why would Red Bull risk a paradise duo, one that is P1 and P2 in the Drivers' Championship, just to bring back Ricciardo, who may or may not pose a threat to Verstappen's championship aspirations in the future? It goes without saying that Perez does not want to give up on his dream of fighting for the championship, and although that sounds like a utopia scenario right now, with him barely holding the second spot in the Drivers' Championship, it is how it is in his head, and he's keeping this mentality for the remainder of the season. Still, the reality in the world we live in is different, and the only reason Perez is barely holding up to that second spot in the Drivers' Championship is because there aren't many drivers who are competitive below him to snatch it away, as both Alonso and Hamilton have taken a step backwards, and we've seen the rise of McLaren. However, Ricciardo's decision to replace De Vries and prepare himself for the Red Bull's voyage in the foreseeable future is definitely something that will keep us on our toes, mostly because now McLaren has picked up the pace and is likely to deliver similar results as they did in Silverstone, meaning that the field behind Red Bull is getting closer and closer. So even though Red Bull does not have issues keeping the championship monotonous and one-sided, and with how Perez has performed in the last couple of races and kept the Constructors' Championship more or less secured, it's not a guarantee that this scenario will be a given to them in the near future. The last thing that Red Bull wants is a driver who would try and threaten Verstappen for the championship battle. But then again, when all hell breaks loose, he would be missing out on Q3 for 5 consecutive races and constantly get called out by the team and the F1 experts for having to make up lost ground in the qualifying session. The first warning Perez had about him losing the seat was given when Red Bull signed Ricciardo as their reserve driver back in 2022 after the Brazil GP. But the team moving the Honey Badger to AlphaTauri is an even further indicator that they might look to end things with the Mexican driver. Winning races is now seeming like a mission impossible for him, and even though he publicly stated that he isn't worried about his seat in Red Bull, as long as he delivers the results he wants and knows the entire team stands behind him. We've seen what happened with De Vries, who gave more or less the same statement as Perez. If there is one thing that Red Bull is known for, it's the impatience for drivers to deliver good results, and sacking De Vries after just 12 races has emphasized this all over again. The fact that he wasn't even the first choice for the team, as Colton Herta wasn't granted the super license he desperately vowed to the FIA for, goes to show that there was always a doubt about his ability to perform in AlphaTauri. But the fact is that the 28-year-old was put in the wrong place at the wrong time, and Red Bull thought he would have what it takes to take over the lead from Tsunoda and do similar things as Albon is doing right now with Williams, be in points competition constantly. Obviously, Ricciardo is not in the rebuild plan for both Red Bull and AlphaTauri because at the age of 34, there's little he could offer in terms of remaining with the team for 10 or 15 years, but he is an experienced driver who will definitely prove that he has what it takes to drive the Red Bull car. The thing is, the Austrian team will have a low-risk, high-reward situation with Ricciardo because from where he was in McLaren to where he is right now, I'm sure that he would sign a contract to be the second driver in Red Bull and fight for podiums and occasional race wins without a doubt. With this in mind, there is a serious threat over Perez's contractual situation with Red Bull, and as far as I'm concerned, this has the potential to cause yet another silly season, one in which the Mexican driver might not have as much luck as he did at the end of the 2020 season when he secured the seat in Red Bull after the Sakir win. Therefore, what do you think about Ricciardo's chance to endanger Perez's seat at Red Bull? Do you think he'll perform the way he would be required to by AlphaTauri? Let us know in the comments below.